My name's Phil Smith and I'm Chair of Skills England.
Phil, can we talk about the Skills England priority areas and the recent industrial strategy?
Yeah, so those are very intertwined. So let me quickly talk about the industrial strategy first, because it sort of has a bit of logic behind putting it that way. So the industrial strategy was announced yesterday. I was at the a bit of a launch celebration, if you will, last night with Secretary of State and so on. And I sit on the Industrial Strategy Council, Advisory Council, as a result of my Skills England role. And the way I see it is industrial strategy is the government saying, okay, genuinely growth was their top priority. It's a growth mission is vital. So if you're going to have a growth mission, if you're a company or an organisation or a country, what's your strategy to do that? What are the things that are going to generate growth? And so, of course, the government have announced an industrial strategy in which there are 8 priority sectors where they believe they can generate supernormal growth, shall we say, a growth which will genuinely help the whole country to grow. As a result of that, if you're one of those sectors who probably would have grown anyway, what are the things you need that allow you to make that growth more effective? And of course, some of those are things like regulation, infrastructure, but of course, universally, skills is the thing. They say we need the right skills. There's lots of vacancies. We don't have the right skills for the growth and so on. So the industrial strategy sort of sets the template for that. We obviously had things like energy pricing and so on that was addressed. But those are all kind of infrastructure issues that have to be there to allow sectors to be successful. Now, the industrial strategy covers more than that, but in essence, that's what it's doing, is setting that framework for how the country is going to grow. Skills England then has to say, okay, so if that is the case, alongside all this other stuff that's going on here today in AELP in the existing world, how do we actually build a skills system that fits into that industrial strategy? And so Skills England has to not only set itself up and be successful in what it's doing and carry on the great work that was done by IFET and others to be successful, but they have to genuinely be looking at what are the ways to make a big difference in here. Because we can't just, when the Prime Minister, in fact, announced Skills England, he announced and he said, you know, with skills system really important, but it's a mess and it's not fulfilling what we need. Now, a mess doesn't mean that everything's broken, it just means it's incredibly badly organised, it's lying all over the floor, it's doing whatever. So our job really, I think, is to help people to navigate it. So one of the key priorities is how do we simplify this system for individuals, for small business owners, for big business owners, for, you know, anyone, colleges, universities, training providers. I mean, how do you make this thing easier to navigate? It's really hard. And, you know, frankly, everybody here is a bit of an insider. You get what a level 3 is or a level 4 is or whatever. I still get confused now and again, but it's incredible. I mean, you imagine what your regular man or woman on the street or a small business owner who looks out and says, no, I think I'm going to skill my people. Oh my God, I look at it and I have to Google it and I think, oh, I'm not going to bother, I'll just not. And you can see how people will bounce off. So one of the key priorities is how do we simplify and help navigation? One of the other areas, of course, however, is also to how do we make this not something that's simply a government problem or an industry problem or a provider problem? Because that sort of narrative of, you know, you're not giving us the right skills or you're not giving us enough job placements, whatever. I mean, you know, there's truth in all of that, but frankly, we need to go into solutions now. We need to decide how we fix these things. So what are the issues? Why are people not doing certain things? So that's key for Skills England. So simplification, proper collaboration where we're working on creating and co-creating solutions, on working together on solutions, is absolutely vital. And of course, we know, and it's been publicly stated, we have to try and do that in as data-rich a way as we can. You know, what data really, if we're going to fix a problem, let's fix the right problem and not some notional problem that everybody genuinely feels is bad. You know, it's usually not true. You know, people say, oh yeah, no, FE's broken. Well, that's not true. There's lots of amazing FE going on. There may be some that are broken and some are, but that's true of HE, that's true of the skills system generally. So let's be data oriented and work on things. So I guess there's plenty of other things we need to do, but if I was looking at it from my perspective, the board, simplification and collaboration and engagement are probably the 2 big ones I need to really work on.
And I'm loving it that it's data-led, around the priority areas. A couple of things that I've sort of noticed is like, come first with construction. So there was it seemed like it was a bit of a trial base looking outside in around how to be able to make a difference in skills and those vacancies. And there was also then the recent construction, like C-Tech construction. Yesterday in the industrial strategy was defence, which is obviously also very poignant with what's happening in the world. How is Skills England looking to like really deeply embed into those 8 priority areas? Is that tech idea going to be sort of moving on?
No, that's a good point. So basically, if you look at construction, it's a good example. There was a pretty clear sort of in a combination of the industrial strategy and the broader missions that said we want to build 1.5 million houses. All right. Now, construction, as that happened, is not one of the priority sectors in the industrial strategy, but Skills England have extended that in line with the missions to health and social care and construction as 2 that we know are part of fulfilling the government's missions. So if we take the the example of construction know they need to build 1.5 million houses, and therefore what they've done is they've self-assembled. Mark Reynolds, who's the executive chair of MACE, has got a bunch of CEOs together. He's working with CITB and AITB and the various other groups around and saying, okay, how can we talk with a sort of unified voice, not just to Skills England, but more broadly, to government for regulation and planning and all those other things. But how can we speak with some sort of coordinated environment? So I think that's a great example. We know they've got 600 million of money and they've got 60,000 more placements and so on. So, you've got to sort of think in your own head, government, things are complicated for government at times, and if you just expect them to sort of sort every industry out, that's a problem. So industries need to sort of bring themselves together. And I think defence is doing a bit of that now, as you say, complicated industry, but nonetheless doing it. But I think there's an opportunity not only for the industrial strategy sectors, primarily those ones for now, but once we learn how to do that better, how do you speak with a combined voice in professional services or finance or digital for that matter, which is particularly tough, this industry I come from. How do you speak with a unified voice? Well, if we can do that and with the same kind of level of, CEO sponsorship and engagement with the communities, that's got to be powerful. And that means that we in Skills England and more broadly across the community have people to talk to. And then, frankly, if there are people who are not in that community, you have to say, well, actually, why don't you talk to them? Because actually we need to talk in a combined way. It's not about being exclusive, it's about being inclusive in there. So,
And in the recent reports that come out from Skills England on day of launch, there was talk of bolt-on training, and I was kind of interested in around interdisciplinary and thinking of those priority areas.
Yeah, so really interesting. So bolt-on and interdisciplinary and short courses and all the other sort of modular and such like. I mean, I think we've got to think 2 things here. One is that we obviously recognise that the government-based skills system has been about quality and diligence and structure and so on, and that's important. But we also know we're living in a world of dynamism and flexibility and change and evolution and so on. And those don't always match particularly well. So we've got to find a way of doing things differently than we did before. So, if you think about a course that's all about, exactly what you should do, how it's all written down, all the, every step you have to take, that's great. And of course it's clear. But if you're talking about something like AI or anything that's in this sort of dynamic range, clean tech, biotech and so on, these are things that are moving like crazy. So somehow or another, my view has always been that some kind of, you've got a sort of central core, which is probably doing some of the more fundamental things. You need to learn some maths, you need to learn some English, you need to learn whatever, but you need to learn some cores of a subject like engineering, what the mechanics and so on involved. But there's a load of stuff around the side of it, like, digital capability, AI usage, which is going to keep changing. So how can we make those things more dynamic that eventually might become part of the core, but they don't have to be in the core on day one? I mean, that's something. So that sort of principle of bolt-on and modularity is got a lot of interest, and certainly is something that I know I in Skills England are keen to understand and engage with much better. And in an interdisciplinary thing, I'm not sure exactly what the root of all that is, but if one thinks about it from just from a business perspective, it's rarely actually now just people who have got one skill you want. You want people, if you're a young plumbing apprentice, for example, and you join a plumber, the plumber will be frustrated. It's like, I know you don't know how to bend a pipe proper, you don't know how to solder. But actually, if you know a little bit about how to set a website up or how to do a bit of e-commerce, that plumber's going to be quite interested in that. And that kind of interdisciplinary being and a bit of digital capability as well as a bit of other things is quite an interesting way to look at things. And I think the more we can do that, if you're an engineer, but you've also got some other attributes as well, which might be socially oriented and so on, that would be good. So I think cracking it in one area, retail is a good example, where they're very good at hospitality front of house. Well, that's pretty much true for every business as well. So why don't we learn more between them? So that's a bit of that thinking.
Really interesting. You've talked about digital and AI.
Yeah.
Fast-moving worlds of AI at the moment, and at the same time, it's interesting about bolt-on training because qualifications normally got a 2-year cycle.
Yeah.
Gen AI is only 2.5 years old.
Yeah.
So, what's the sort of thinking moving forward with AI from Skills England perspective? I know it's an evolving world.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is it is evolving now. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to know the detail of how to write a large language model or what, it's just not the case. But what people need is confidence to be able to use AI. How do you actually use this thing? So I think what we need to be thinking about is, we had last week the announcement of 7.5 million people who are going to be trained in AI using the benefit or the leverage of the big tech companies. That's still to be determined exactly what that looks like. We had Tech First being announced, which was this principle of how do you get people at different levels to engage with digital technology and AI in particular. And I think what we need to think about is how we provide a combination of, some of that capability, but frankly in every course. Really, if you're in a school or if you're in a training provider or you're doing an apprenticeship or you're doing a degree, you probably need some kind of module that allows you to get the latest views of how to use this kind of stuff. Because as we know, as you say, Gen AI is only a couple of years old from this general population perspective. But things like agentic AI and other advanced things are coming along all the time now, and people are, if you think you can put that into a normal curriculum cycle, I think we're dreaming here. We've got to find new ways of doing things. So.
And one last question around, we've got a large NEET population, and the priority areas, there's devolution and looking at local. Is Skills England working with DWP or got plans to do that to better link up for young people into the priority areas and access routes?
It's kind of crazy that we've got 1 million or so young people who are not in education training. You've got 3 or 4 million people who are on disability benefit who may or could potentially have a worthwhile job that they would like to do, and you've got 2 or 3 million people who left the workforce after COVID because they didn't feel economically viable. If we're going to drive a growth strategy for the country, then how do we build things that allow them to engage? And NEETs in particular are obviously, you've seen recent announcements by the government about focusing some of the resources towards younger people. A lot of that's about giving an opportunity for people to be successful at that young age. But it's not a simple problem. This is not a matter of, we'll just do a bunch of apprentices and suddenly a load of people who are NEETs will not be NEETs. This is about, inspiration. It's about catching people in the right areas. It's about going to the watering holes as opposed to setting up something new. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's some great organised. I was with Movement to Work at the beginning of the week, and the guys there who are represent a whole different people from industry who are working on bringing NEETs into the workforce and working with companies to get placements. And so it's a lot. It's a complex area, not a simple solution, but definitely one we're very passionate about finding solutions and capability to address.